New horror film in theaters, It Lives Inside. Just saw this last night. This is the story of an Indian American, as in from India, American young girl, high school girl who doesn't quite fit in. She really wants to fit in. Her family is still rather traditional. Her mother still is very traditional. She wants her to speak Hindu. She wants her to go about the normal practices of the family and the culture and the religion. And the young girl, not little, she wants to break free. She wants to be like her American friend. She doesn't want to be the other. She wants to assimilate. She's in America. She wants to speak English. She wants to wear clothes like the Americans do. She wants to go and do the things the Americans do. And she's sort of pulling away from her mother a bit. And amongst all of this, at school, her former close friend, also of Indian heritage, is very withdrawn. She's wearing baggy clothes, and she's not making eye contact anywhere, and she's with anybody, and she's wearing a winter jacket, and she's carrying around this black jar for some reason, and she's mumbling to herself, and she's really weird. And what's the deal? Well, I'm not going to tell you, if you know me, too much about the plot beyond this. Let's just say there's something very, very bad in the jar, something that goes back to their culture as a mythological bad thing, and that thing gets released. So It Lives Inside refers to the jar that this thing was in, or the vessel that this thing needs to be kept in, lest it go out and feed on souls and cause, havoc in and around the people that it's attached to. So, as I said, this is a horror movie. Infuses a lot of Indian culture, which was really cool. At the core of the film is this girl and her parents and her friend, and how they interact with the culture around them and their own microcosmic culture in the town that they live in, and this evil thing that's sort of nipping at their heels and literally lurking in the shadows. This was quite well done. I wouldn't say I loved it, but I liked it while I watched it. It was effectively creepy. It did not rely on lame jump scares. It did not rely on CGI much at all. It did not rely on the lame CGI thing of somebody's mouth opening too wide so they look like a cartoon character. It managed to avoid most modern, what I call everything I hate about modern horror. It was a good suspenser. Very simple. Not a lot of crazy locations. Nobody's hanging off a moving train in the rain as the lightning. I always say it's not the Van Helsing thing where it's a stagecoach on a teetery mountain road with a werewolf and it's on fire. It's none of that garbage. It is relatively low key. Reminded me a bit of It Follows, and that's a thing. We were talking about it after the movie, and Val brought up that it really feels like a lot of films we've already seen. And I didn't think about that too much at the time, but as we discussed it, it's like, okay, yeah, well, that's kind of like the Babadook, and that's kind of like It Follows, and that's kind of like something else, and that's kind of like something else. And that, as I say often, no offense to the filmmakers, bravo for getting it made, bravo for making it a good movie and getting it in theaters. I always feel like a lot of modern screenwriters haven't really gone out and lived life and had a lot of experiences and experienced culture and history and other things and this and that and work experience in life. I feel like a lot of modern screenwriters are people who've watched a lot of the most popular movies of the last 20 or 30 years over and over again, and that results in us getting things that feel like stuff we've already seen. If you're somebody like me who watches a lot of stuff and hungrily, much like the creature in this film, hungrily consumes everything you can cinematically and retains it, after a while you see a lot of stuff pop up and you're like, well, yeah, but it's like that other thing. So at any rate, that didn't really bother me while I was watching it. It's just something that may occur to you if you're a horror fan or a film historian or whatever you want to call yourself, and you've seen a lot of movies. But I love that it dives into Indian culture. I love that it shows us a world that a lot of us might not be too aware of, and some of their traditions and customs, and then draws from that for the source of the horror in this film. Very atmospheric. I think this will play well. No stars in this nobody I recognize. Well, a woman who plays the teacher was in Get Out. So that was, I think, the one person I recognized from this film. And that's great because if I watch a movie without major stars, as far as I'm concerned, that person is that character on screen. I often will say this. If I see Tom Cruise, I'm looking at Tom Cruise. No matter what the role is supposed to be, it's Tom Cruise. If you look at John Wayne, it's John Wayne. Tom Hanks is usually pretty much Tom Hanks. But when you watch a movie with somebody who you don't really recognize, the old Sam Raimi rule, anybody can die at any time. In a horror movie, that's much more valid because you're not like, well, they're never going to kill off Janet Leigh in this film. And it sells it better for me. So there were a couple of logic questions. Like there's a point where the girl is looking for some information, and the teacher is at school, or she's like, "Oh, I'll help you find out." And the teacher's like nighttime, and the teacher's like at school on the computer, and she's the only one there. And it seemed like a narrative convenience, because I'm like, well, she doesn't have the internet at home. Why is she the only person at school that late? I don't know. Any quibbles I had were very minor quibbles with this. I thought this was good. It did remind me of other things. At one point, I did wonder if it was going to be like a sneaky backdoor sequel to It Follows, but it's not. It lives inside.